I don't want to hear, how bad it is on one end, and then on another end, I'm kind of really pumped to hear like what I need to do, for someone with expertise, with knowledge to actually lay it out for me and make me feel like here's step one, two, and three. Hi, everyone. So today is session two of my iSpot Mentorship program. And I have pretty much been quiet these past 2 weeks since session one, where I kind of did the majority of the talking and did, laying out all of my illustration, all of my graphic design, all of my work history, my experience, things that I want to help with, things that I felt like needed work, and kind of went over all of the things that I hoped would come from this mentorship program. And today I am 20 minutes from doing session two, which session two is the big session, which I feel like is like the major point of all of this is to like get that feedback, get that information that I can work on and really, think about what my website looks like, what my portfolio looks like, what I can do to make it better, what I'm missing, what I'm not seeing. And these are the pros, right? So I'm so excited to get criticism right now. And that feels weird probably to some people, but I am all for it. I'm kind of gearing up, kind of getting my week calendar filled out, kind of trying to understand what all I need to think about. I've got my notebook, I've got all this stuff. I'm hoping that I can get a recording of the session. We'll write that down. And I'm really looking forward to it. I've had kind of a really tough week. There's just been a whole lot going on and personal stuff, professional, everything. I mean, it's just been a really tough week all around, even for our country, right? And so it feels like, and I'm really hoping, and I'm hoping that I don't have such high expectations for the experience of this mentorship program that I'm either let down or like I feel like something's missing, or I feel like I'm torn to shreds through this experience. I don't want that. Those are the things that I'm really like, I don't want to hear, how bad it is on one end, and then on another end, I'm kind of really pumped to hear like what I need to do, for someone with expertise, with knowledge to actually lay it out for me and make me feel like here's step one, two, and three. And that is kind of I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to more perspective and hoping there isn't anything that makes me feel, I don't know, like terrible about myself. Like I didn't get that impression. Like I didn't get the impression that there was going to be any kind of feedback that I was going to be upset over. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. I'm really hopeful that there's going to be some great feedback and some interesting points and things that I can truly work on and, take action on and improve on. So I'm hoping it's a valuable experience, basically. So, anyway, this is my recording before that meeting, and then I'll do a recording after that to kind of record my impressions and what I think is going on and how I feel about it. It can be really hard to kind of know what to expect. I've invested a lot in this. I've invested a lot of my time, all of my energy, all of my dreams, my hard work, and I want it to come to fruition like we all do. And so really interested to see what happens. And I'm hoping it's informative at the very least, very informative. So I'll be back. I'll be back in a minute. Okay. Bye. So I just got done with session two and very, very fascinating. A lot of it is just it's things that you just don't realize or don't recognize when you're working on your own stuff, I guess. It seems like a lot of it is just so, I don't know, kind of obvious, but not really obvious. Found it really interesting because there were certain illustrations that they seemed to be drawn to, or some certain ones that they were like, well, that one is really good or that one's really strong, is interesting. Realizing some of the things that I've just not seen, just haven't noticed, little details, little things that could be better. The information on the social media things, especially like making a marketing list. I think I'm getting channels in my mind sort of mixed up in like having this thinking in the form of, well, that's salesy, or that's like I'm trying to sell a product. And so I can't email those people versus it being like a business relationship, like a business to consumer kind of thing, and understanding, you know, that there are things that are appropriate in a business relationship that might not be appropriate in a consumer way, and understanding that I can email an art director. And how simple is that? And how ridiculous is it? But for some reason in my mind, it was like, well, that's inappropriate. That's like I'm being a salesperson. And what's really weird is that I can do it for graphic design, but for some reason with illustration, it I didn't really connect those dots. And I had no idea that I wasn't connecting those dots and that I wasn't thinking about it in the same way. It's as if in my brain I have separated it so much into these different categories: illustration, graphic design, fine art, that I didn't recognize that there can be crossovers in some of the ways that you connect with people and the way that you present yourself. And that I've had crossover information where, like, okay, maybe as a business selling a product, you can't just go find people's emails and make an email list. Like, that's not okay. But you can do that when you're trying to get work as a graphic designer or an illustrator. What? Like, why didn't I know that? Why didn't I like make those connections? And this mentorship has been wonderful for just like pulling out those little tidbits of things that I have somehow mentally scrambled in my head and haven't really been aware of. Like, how long would it take me to have recognized that's a thing? Like that, like how long would it have taken me to make that connection of you're thinking about this like it's a product and you're spamming people. But what you're trying to do is have a business relationship and work together. And that is not the same as spamming. What? Because, I mean, in no part of my brain have I thought about it in a way of like having intentions of like truly spamming, of like emailing them. Like you get those emails that are really irritating and you have to put them in your junk folder. But I have no intentions of doing that and have never attempted to do that, even in, my professional connections, but realizing that that is actually a thing that I can do and how simple that is and how, of course you can do that. One of the things they mentioned on my website and portfolio is having my contact information on the very first page, which I thought, of course I need to do that. And it was last week sometime that I was watching another sort of like a mentorship that someone else was doing on YouTube, and they recommended that, to those people, to that artist, like, why, just put your contact information on the main page because that's what you want them to do, right? Is contact you. And then, some of the navigation organizational things that would make sense, making sure that all my links are going where they should go, having my website on my Instagram instead of like just my link tree. The possibility of having multiple accounts as far as like my graphic design and my illustration on Behance, which it wouldn't be that much trouble or that much difficulty to do that, I don't think, because I probably wouldn't update the graphic design nearly as much. And that could just be out there and connected, and having a different. I'm gonna have to really look into that part. That was interesting. Using my LinkedIn for my illustration and my graphic design. The way that they explained finding people's contact information. That's something that I've been trying to figure out for work, for my graphic design work and the podcasting and everything, is getting in contact with people that would be good guests on my work related podcast and making those connections as far as like being able to message them and say, hey, we appreciate your work and we think you would be a good fit to be interviewed, and really recognizing that and how much information. God, it feels like some expensive information to learn, but how long would I have ever figured that out? Would I have ever, you know, had some way to like mark it down, like do these things 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I expected that. I did. I expected that. I expected there to be a lot of things that were probably obvious to other people that would make sense and would be logical, and I didn't recognize. And I could imagine how many people are out there like that, like me, like, and I'm talking about like I read I read blogs, I read books, I read magazines, I'm very aware and very actively searching for answers to things. I'm curious. I'm not just like sitting in my studio or in my office like, I wonder what I should do. I'm actively trying to figure these things out, and yet still there's all these things that I just had not connected in my brain. And that is so wild. That's so wild. It was really helpful to get a perspective from a team of people who are professionals, who are really making sense of this stuff. Because as logical as it is, as simple as the answers are, anyway, I feel really excited. I feel like I've got a lot to work on, a lot to learn through this process, but also just really like dig deeper down into it and take on some of these challenges and really make a purposeful, step by step. Here we go. This is what we're doing. And I can't wait. So, one of the things that I did was I asked if I could record, which I'm very glad that I did. And I did record and I did get audio, and I'm going to make a transcript of that audio, and then I'm going to upload that audio to ChatGPT and ask it to make an outline and some action steps from the audio from the transcript and see what it says, because I think that would be really helpful, because I could sit back through the video and I probably will multiple times, but Yes. And they introduced me to like three more artists that have kind of like similar style of work, similar sort of focus, and I'm just feeling really strong about it. And I'm like, yes, okay. So my work makes sense here, and I'm not crazy, for wanting to be in this industry. And these are people who are very similar. They're similar. That really helped me feel better, like getting that information and being able to say, whoa, these people are saying to me, here are some artists who are doing similar things, and giving me those names and giving me those people. Because, like, you can think all you want to about like how something may be kind of similar. Maybe I can do something like that, but you're also still unsure about whether or not that's actually true, like, no, my work's not as good as that, or maybe I don't think mine looks like that actually. I'm not doing it quite like that. But having professionals tell you, okay, here's some artists that you're doing things like, that's helpful. That's really helpful. All of this information is very fascinating. And I'm going to run it back through. Like, I had made some outlines that I sent to them of things that I needed and I wanted to know about. And I'm going to run it back through that and see what's missing, because, I worked pretty hard on that as far as like gathering that information and not like letting something fall through the cracks that I didn't get answered, So I hope that you have really enjoyed these sessions as much as I have, and I hope that it's helpful to you to hear about these things because it's been really helpful to me. And I think that, finding people who know the industry and getting that real like one-on-one review and meeting session with is so important. And I just cannot believe how many things, like and they weren't huge things, but it was like lots of little things, that I could be doing a little bit differently, that would really help, like would change the game. And that is phenomenal. I mean, I think it's just really phenomenal. I'm just like a little overwhelmed, but at the same time really excited because I feel like, okay, I got some good stuff here. Now let's get going. That was session 2 that I recorded in, I believe, February. Another part of that I wanted to mention was, did they remark on my work or my illustrations, or, speak to me about my style or my quality of work? And really, everything was very positive. And their response was, you've already got that part down. You've got a style, you've got the quality, you have the ideas, you know how to draw, you know how to depict things, you know how to put together work that is professional, that is interesting, that tells stories. You have all of that already figured out. So we're not going to talk to you about that. Was kind of the vibe, right? But one of the things that I also found very interesting that I didn't mention on the previous recording was that they kind of specifically geared my work towards editorial, editorial and book cover design, which I was not thinking about at all. So when I heard about this mentorship, I heard about it through a Society of Children's Books Writers and Illustrators. I think it was like a course or online sort of meeting thing for the group. And I was like, oh, that sounds really interesting. I'm curious about that. And so I went and looked it up. And so I think in my mind, I kind of associated it with children's books and children's book illustration. And so I was preparing to talk about that. And so when they came back with all of this information around editorial and book cover design, that threw me off. And I told them that. I was like, wow, I didn't even think about that, you know? And so since then, I have really worked on that and applied some, you know, knowledge on that. And being a graphic designer, I know how to design a book cover. I know how to design interior pages. I know how to design packaging. That is one of those key points where having a graphic design degree actually moves me ahead, because that's something that a lot of artists, illustrators might not have experience in, because I've actually designed books. I've laid them out. I've put all the information in there. I've made the chapter pages, like I've done all the things. I know how to get something printed and formatted to be printed, and I know what a bleed is. I mean, it's just fascinating. And since then, I've paid more attention to editorial. If you aren't familiar with editorial, what I mean by that is like magazines, articles, news. Whenever you see any kind of little art or drawing or graphics that are with an actual article. I have an example. So this is a book that I have. So this isn't particularly in my style, if you can really get a good look at that. But that's something that would be considered editorial, but it's also book cover design. So, there's a lot of elements to that. And it kind of makes sense though, and it's interesting because at the same time, they pulled out one of these artworks that was very sci-fi technology based, and it was because I was thinking about those things. That's what I'm designing for with work. And so I have those technologies and that information kind of swirling around in my mind, and was thinking about healthcare and genetic altering genes and things like that, and was, kind of drawing and coming up with ideas, not really with any intention, but I created this very editorial looking piece. Although not like technical, is still like watercolor and traditional looking. And that was another point. They were surprised to know that everything was digital. Like all the stuff that I had shown them was digital, and it looks traditional. And I cannot tell you how much that meant to me that they weren't sure, because that meant all these years, the time I've been taking on developing that and trying to get that look and feel into my work, that I'm actually doing it, like I'm actually creating work that has that appearance to your average person or your professional. You know what I mean? And it's not that I'm trying to pass it off as traditional, it's a quality, it's a style and a quality that gives you more of I personally feel like a visceral kind of experience. Digital, a lot of times, can be very glossy and shiny and smooth and blended, and or it can be very hard and sharp shapes, things like that. Can have a lot of detail, a lot of depth. It can have a lot of information and stuff going on and be beautiful, but you already know that, well, that's digital, and I wanted to kind of blur that line a little bit, because I also wanted to create prints of my work, things that people might want to hang in their home. Not everything, obviously, but kind of give that feeling of traditional without it necessarily being traditional. And they got that. They were like, yeah, that's what that looks like. That's amazing. And one other thing that they tend to point out is that that's very rare, because it's difficult to do. It's not something that most people try to figure out or try to do. Being a traditional artist, moving into digital, and still working in traditional, I I want the styles to kind of blend. I want there to be sort of that crossover. And, you know, where you may not necessarily realize that something is traditional or digital, and I want it to all look like mine. That's the point. So I worked really hard on that, and they acknowledged it. They saw it. They said, "This is rare. This is really good. You're doing great with your art." And that was like within the first 10 minutes of session two. They were like, "Oh, we don't even need to talk about that. We need to talk about your social media. We need to talk about your website. We need to talk about, you know, what publishers are looking for, what agents are looking for, how they want to, I guess, consume your content, and also how to get in touch with those people in ways that I just sort of shut off. Like, I always separate my graphic design and my art, my illustration, because I have a graphic design career that I enjoy and I love, but I want to explore illustration and learn more and grow and explore that, because there's so much of that that originates in my interest in art is around drawing and painting and making things versus graphic design. And so I've always kept the two separate, and especially on LinkedIn kept things separate. But I don't want there to be confusion. You know what I mean? There's just like this little bitty thread of, if I pull this thread, is this all going to fall apart? It really validated my experience as an artist and sort of calmed my nerves about like not being good enough or not having the right qualities there, because there are a lot of people out there who don't necessarily get it. It's like a whole nother level of understanding. It like takes some, you know, some of the worry and concern about one thing off the plate, and then clears the slate to give you very specific action points, which we'll come back to later. And next up will be session three next week. And that is where I have done some of the things and changed things. I've actually worked on some of the action points and I'm bringing it back to them and we're having discussion about it. So, even more interesting. So, make sure you like and subscribe and follow along this really great journey. Thank you so much.